Welcome to today's edition of Feet to the Fire, where we're always challenging the status quo. For more cutting-edge commentary, go to feettothefire.org. That is feet, the number 2, thefire.org. And now your host.
All right, everyone, welcome. Excited to get started here with our first ever Feet to the Fire podcast. What we're going to be about with this resource is a critical survey of American culture and politics. We may talk about current events, history, law, philosophy, civics, anything I want really with highly charged inflammatory opinions. Each session, I'll be bringing you a succinct discourse on some essential topic in American life. The idea is to hold people's feet to the fire. There's a lot of nonsense out there, a lot of false information, fraudulent information, and I want to speak out and dispel that. We're going to hold their feet to the fire, hold them accountable for all the error that's being sent into the American identity and confusing everything in every debate and discussion. Who are these folks distorting reality in America? Unfortunately, a lot of historians, politicians, people in the media, professors, educators, really elitists, the establishment, everybody who knows better, eating the croissants and sipping the tea while the country class sinks into deeper disorder and confusion, or so they want to think. It's the people out there peddling a wrong view of America, a wrong view of reality, a wrong view of truth and knowledge, a wrong view of politics and education, a wrong view of history, a wrong view of religion, and for that matter, a wrong view of anything else you can think of. It's time we hold their feet to the fire. Well, what's today's topic? The first topic is going to be America defined. What in the world are we defending anyway? What is America? I think that's a big question. We have to know what we are. Can we define our country, our form of government? Can you answer that in your own mind? I have a hunch you probably can't. I'm looking for a concise, all-encompassing phrase. If I asked you, what is America? What is our form of government? Dramatic pause, you would say? Okay, well, we're going to answer that. Fisher Ames, a founding father who helped frame the First Amendment, said that our liberty, quote, our liberty depends on our education, our laws, and habits. Well, then, we have to know what our laws are. If our liberty depends on that, we have to be educated in that. In our laws, form and function. So we're going to be holding in this session educators and historians or historical revisionists. We're going to hold their feet to the fire for the screwed up version of civics that they've given us. They've totally confounded the idea of what America is. So let's start with what we're not. If you said we're a democracy, unfortunately, you're wrong. We are not a democracy, and that may come as a surprise. And we're going to kind of talk about this for this first session. What is democracy? Democracy in its purest form is majoritarianism or populism. Okay, think of rule by mob or mobism. Popularity contest in high school. That's democracy. Democracy in its most reduced substance, is akin to suggesting that every law and legislative act be put up for a nationwide vote, with the natural and yet frightening result that the loudest voice with the most votes wins. And therein lies the fundamental error in populism. It's this presumption that majority rule is necessarily, intrinsically, somehow fair or equitable. But my question would be, what happens when the majority is insane and should be institutionalized? Then our romantic notions of liberated voters becomes a nightmare. So just having majority rule is not necessarily fair. Think of the French Revolution around 1800. Reign of Terror, guillotines, a lot of heads getting lopped off and then followed by Napoleon. The American experience worked a lot better. The French democratic revolution, didn't work too well. America has a different framework. Now, the best platitude that embodies this unrealistic democratic idealism, what I'm going to call democratic idealism, is MTV's Rock the Vote. Everybody knows that. Now, I'm all for people voting, so go get registered and vote. But just everyone simply voting is not an end in itself. That's not political success. This presumed lofty notion of democracy as an end to itself, that there is supposed intrinsic virtue in everyone merely getting a vote, is not the American experience. For all the political engines of a free people to be reduced toward a minimal and naive accomplishment of making this childish claim, hey, at least everyone had a say, that's tragic and wasteful. Talk about least common denominator. We sleep well at night thinking we have a free and just society just because everybody got to vote. What if everyone voted for something dumb? Is that still a good reason to celebrate a free society? How about shooting for something better, something higher, like we all voted and we ended up with good government? Do you understand what I'm saying? Just saying we all had a voice is not a political accomplishment. Not if the end result is stupid. So great, we all had a voice at stupidity. That is political disaster, regardless of the absence of Gestapo at the ballot box. Democracy as an end to itself is no sort of goal to shoot for. Just saying we had free elections doesn't mean we had political success. And yet, our elites, professors, media, politicians, they push this one man, one vote majority rules idealism. And they call it, here's their catchphrase, cultural consensus or moral consensus, as though if the majority agrees, it's necessarily right. So much so that we have everybody force-fed this idea that we're a democracy. Students, all the way up to our adults now. And the ruling class loves democratic idealism in practice. Why do they love democratic idealism in practice? Because it's a very powerful weapon for tyranny. If you can convince the majority of something and get them to vote for it, you can dominate the culture. And so what we see is they're deconstructing those pillars in our framework that prevent majoritarianism. Perfect example, they hate the Electoral College and they're going after the Electoral College. In the early 1900s, they amended the Constitution to take away the state legislative appointment process for the U.S. Senate. And now we use populism. We use democracy, direct election, to elect our senators. And we'll talk more about that down the road. But they are raising up this standard of democratic idealism, much to the harm of our liberty. It is a major threat to liberty. An authentic and informed American patriot rejects democratic idealism. And the reason is quite simple. The most popular opinion running the show is a horrible idea. It is horrible in theory, and it is horrible in practice. Why it is horrible in theory is relatively self-evident. When the majority all says, liberate the slave, well, that's really good. But when it says, kill the Jews, well, that's altogether dangerous, and we find ourselves wishing that MTV hadn't rocked that vote to register all the anti-Semites. And it is horrible in practice because it didn't work out too well for ancient Greece. So, if we're not a pure democracy, what is political success? Political success is establishing a free and civil society, ordered liberty, moral order, justice. Democracy is a shallow goal. Effective government is a greater goal. Yes, we want voters, but we want voters not running an asylum. Rather, voters electing statesmen running a structured civil society, statesmen who represent our interests in a competitive field of divided government. And there's a word for that, which will better designate what we are. But that will be next time. So in conclusion, democracy in part, but not as the whole, is a piece of the defining nature of our American government. More to come. But until then, let justice roll down like waters, America, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Don't believe the hype out there. Open your mouth and hold their feet to the fire.